Six Flags Over Georgia is known for being one of the worst parks in the country. Not because of its coaster lineup, but because of its customer service and overall look. I, on the other hand, enjoyed my experience at the park and was pleasantly surprised by its lineup. Because of this, I'm going to be counting down my top 10 roller coasters at Six Flags Over Georgia. If you've never been theme park hunting before, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for new content just like this every week. Before I get to the list, I want to say that Batman the Ride, the B&M Inverted Coaster, and Mindbender, the Schwarzkopf Looping Coaster, were closed throughout my visit due to a total revamp of Gotham City at Over Georgia. So because of this, you will not see these coasters on the list. But I was lucky enough to get a ride on the other 9 credits, so let's get right to the countdown. Number 9. Joker Funhouse Coaster, Chance Rides Custom Big Dipper. Since this is the smallest coaster in the park, it's obviously going to be at the bottom of the list. Not because it was a bad ride, but because it was a family ride. One thing that I thought was strange was how rough the lift hill was on this coaster. Every single time you went over a wheel, the whole train just thumped. On the other hand, the ride was a smooth and fun little family coaster that actually had some hidden surprising sections throughout its layout. This, on the other hand, is probably the strangest family coaster I've ridden, as I haven't seen anything like it at any other park. Number 8. Dahlonega Mine Train, Aerodynamics Mine Train. I've never been a fan of these Aeromind Trains, but this one I found to be okay. There wasn't anything special with this coaster at all. In fact, I found this coaster to have the most boring layout out of the other 2 that I've ridden. But the big drop in the very back does give a decent pop of ejector. And I heard if you sit in the front, you have a chance of getting small pops of ejector throughout the layout. In the end, I found this mine train to just act as a mediocre family coaster in the park, as that really is all it is for this whole park. Number 7. Blue Hawk, Bakoma MK1200. Formerly known as Ninja, this Bakoma looping coaster just flat out sucked. I understand that when they redid this ride, they painted the track and fixed some of its profiling, but they didn't do the best job. The restraints on this ride were pretty bad. Since I would consider myself pretty tall, the restraints absolutely crushed my shoulders throughout the entire ride. There were many sections where the ride was intense, but in a bad way. Every inversion would jerk the whole train around, as since I sat in the back, you would see the whole train just swaying from side to side. And all the inversions I found to be pretty janky. In the end, this ride was just a horrible experience, and instead of slightly fixing it, Six Flags should have just torn this ride down for a better roller coaster. Number 6. Superman Ultimate Flight, B&M Flyer. I know that this spot may seem really low for a flying coaster, but I enjoyed many other coasters at this park, and this one just didn't do much for me. Since Manta is at my home park, I'm used to riding a really good flying coaster nearly every week, so Superman just felt like a smaller and more mediocre Manta. However, the pretzel loop was much more intense than I intended it to be, and since I sat in the back, all the bank turns were much more snappier than I expected. However, I felt that this flying coaster was just missing some extra elements that could have made it much better. Number 5. Daredevil Dive, Gerstlauer Eurofighter. This, as of now, is my favorite Eurofighter. This ride may have not been anything special, but it packs enough for it to be a fun roller coaster. The restraints on this ride were so open, and that allowed the ride to be much more fun. While most of the elements didn't pull any crazy G-forces, there are a couple sections that really surprised me, and the final hardline roll towards the end of the ride pulls some amazing hang time. I went into this ride thinking the drop was going to be the highlight, but boy was I wrong. The layout was so much better than I intended it to be. I would definitely try to get a ride on this on your next visit to Over Georgia. Number 4. Goliath B&M Hyper. I know this may seem like a low spot for this coaster, but I have my reasons. The problem with this coaster is the same problem I had with Superman. I have Mako at my home park, and that's known for being the best B&M hypercoaster in America. I sat in both the very front and the very back on this coaster, and I can agree that Goliath is fun, but I found its layout to just be okay. The drop has to be one of the most boring drops on a B&M hypercoaster, and the first few airtime hills don't give any airtime. Plus, this ride has a pretty bad rattle if you sit towards the back. On both of my rides on Goliath, I didn't really find the ride to be good until you hit the double helix. And those last couple airtime hills were really strong, and I did pleasantly enjoy that section. But in my eyes, Goliath was just a very mediocre B&M hypercoaster. Number 3. The Great American Scream Machine, PTC Woody. Many people call this ride one of the roughest wind coasters in the world, and I agree with that statement. And I know all you guys are probably going crazy the fact that I just put a PTC wooden coaster over a B&M hypercoaster, but for some reason, I absolutely love this ride. I sat in the very back on my 2 rides on the Great American Scream Machine, and I just had so much fun. I have recently built up a tolerance for rough coasters, and since the Scream Machine doesn't really give any airtime, I found it to just be a rough wooden coaster that made me laugh the whole time. For those who like rough coasters can really understand where I'm coming from with this. My friend and I were just loving this ride, as the roughness is really what made it good. At the end of the day, when I could have ridden Goliath or Daredevil Dive again, I chose to get another ride on the Scream Machine just because it was so much fun. Number 2. Georgia Scorcher B&M Stand-Up. This was my very first stand-up coaster, and I will say that I was pleasantly surprised. Many people call Georgia Scorcher the best stand-up coaster, and I can understand why. I had my seat lined up perfectly. The seat wasn't touching my groin area, and my shoulders weren't getting crushed by the large over-the-shoulder restraints. Along with that, I could straighten my legs completely with no problems, and that made the ride significantly better. The drop in the very back provides some great floater airtime, plus there are many elements on this ride that either provide great hang time or an intense whip. The wave turn on this coaster was easily the highlight in my eyes, and I just found myself laughing and smiling throughout the whole ride just because of how weird I thought it felt. Number 1. Twisted Cyclone RMC Hybrid. This coaster blew my expectations out of the water. I went into this coaster thinking it would be a mediocre RMC. I was wrong. The airtime on this coaster was probably the strongest ejector airtime I have ever felt on a roller coaster. While I found the first half of this ride to be lousy, the second half is what makes it one of the best coasters in the world. The ride proves that size doesn't matter when it comes to roller coasters. And after my 4 rides on Twisted Cyclone, it would land a spot in my top 3. So if you ever decide to visit over Georgia, make sure you make Twisted Cyclone your top priority. So there we have it. I know this list may seem extremely controversial, but it's my opinion in the end. And I'm really disappointed that I could not get a ride on Mindbender or Batman, but you will definitely see me back at the park very soon when both of those coasters are open. So tell me what you guys think of my list in the comment section down below, and make sure to subscribe for new content just like this every week. This was Sunday from Theme Park Hunting, and I'll see you guys all later, and remember to follow the thrill.